What is going on? Happy Tuesday to all those who are watching. Hopefully, you're having a solid Tuesday today. It is downpouring here in Chicago, which has just been fantastic. So, I did see earlier today that the Eagles announced an extension for head coach Nick Sirianni. I think it said just a multi-year contract extension. So, didn't really specify the number nor details, but I at least wanted to share some thoughts about Coach Sirianni and just how things have gone over the last 4 years with the Eagles. And then I saw a couple of interesting rule proposals as well as a potential ban and what my thoughts on that actually are. So without further ado, let's get into Nick Sirianni here. So, Coach Sirianni's been an interesting figure in Philly for the last couple of years. I know when he first got hired, I first thought, who is this guy? And I remember seeing the introductory press conference for Nick Sirianni, and my take was similar to most other takes. Who is this fucking guy? Who is this dude? This guy's a goofball. This guy doesn't know what he's doing, blah, 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 blah. I think a lot of people in the media, big head journalists, they're definitely pushing that. And, especially when you watch the press conference, it's easy to feel that way too. And I have to say, over the last 4 years, I kind of dove into some of the figures, and Nick Sirianni's coaching resume is pretty damn impressive. And clearly, the guys like him in the locker room. Clearly, the ownership loves the guy. And it wasn't always that case. After year 3, things felt pretty tense, but it's all played out pretty well for the Eagles, I gotta say. And the quote from Jeffrey Lurie related to this speaks volumes to what they think about Nick Sirianni. And he goes on to say, nothing is more important to fostering such an environment than having tremendous leadership. Nick has embodied everything we're looking for in a head coach since we hired him 4 years ago. His authentic style of leadership, football intelligence, passion for the game, and growth mindset have helped bring out the best in our team. And clearly, that is how they view Nick Sirianni. And clearly, it's worked very well for the Eagles. And over the last 4 years, it was probably some of the better 4 years than most teams have had outside of Kansas City. They had a playoff loss to Tampa, Tom Brady's Bucks. They lost in the Super Bowl to the Chiefs. That's okay. Many teams have. 2 years ago, losing to Tampa, and that was a bit of a concerning spot. And actually, a lot of buzz that season about Nick Sirianni possibly getting fired, getting moved off of. They ended that season with, I want to say, a 6-game slide, and then getting embarrassed in the playoffs. But then following that up with last year and their incredible Super Bowl run. So clearly, it's worked very well, and I was pretty stunned to see this, but Nick Sirianni has had 54 wins, including the playoffs, in the last 4 years. And that is 4th all-time for the Eagles. 4th all-time. And he's only coached there for 4 years, which is insane to think about. And you got to imagine that whatever's going on in the locker room, whatever he's putting forward, putting out there to the team, they're buying in, and it's really working. Now, one of the critiques I know about Nick Sirianni was that he was an offensive coordinator in Indianapolis, but he never called plays. And now in Philly, it's the same thing. He's not calling the plays. So it begs the question of, what is his role really with this team? Is he the CEO? Is he delegating? Is he more of the motivational type of guy, the rah-rah type of coach? How involved is he with the schematics and designing offense? That's up for the Eagles to clarify. But whether it is just the stacked roster or his contributions, it's worked really well for the Eagles. And Howie Roseman deserves a ton of credit for building the Eagles up to where they are now. The drafting, the trades have been insane. Aside from the Jalen Reagor first round pick some time ago, it seems like they just hit. First round, mid, later rounds, their trades, it seems like everything just works. And by all accounts, it seems like Nick Sirianni, Howie Roseman have a good relationship. Seems like they work and cooperate very well. There's a clear hierarchy, of course, that Howie Roseman kind of runs the show, runs the draft, runs all of the acquisitions, and Nick Sirianni handles the day-to-day football biz. And I just was thinking about this too. You have to give them credit that they hire really good assistants. And you got to imagine, I don't know the exact role of who's hiring who, but a lot of Eagles assistants have gone on to become head coaches or just be really damn good. I mean, they had Shane Steichen in the Super Bowl year that they wound up losing. They also had Jonathan Gannon for the defense. Both guys go on to get head coaching roles after the Super Bowl loss, which is pretty darn impressive. And if Nick Sirianni's doing the hiring or at least evaluating some of these guys, he's got a good eye for coaches. Then not to mention bringing in Kellen Moore, who went on to become head coach for New Orleans. Vic Fangio, the defense, looking fantastic. So I wasn't surprised that they were extending Nick Sirianni. I do know just from observing the Eagles that they move pretty quickly. That they are very fast to move off of guys if things are not working. I mean, they spent so much draft capital and money on Carson Wentz some time ago. Led them to a great regular season in 2017. And then Nick Foles, of course, took over after an injury to win the Eagles the Super Bowl. You would imagine, though, all right, Wentz is still our guy. He balled out in the regular season. Things got weird quick, and they moved on pretty quickly from Carson Wentz. Who's to say that after that embarrassing playoff loss 2 years ago, the Eagles weren't going to try to move on from Nick Sirianni? But I think Nick Sirianni has done a great job in Philly. Clearly, the win-loss record speaks for itself. And even if it is more of a product of the stacked team, you still need coaches to coach up your players. You still need guys designing offense and scheme. You still need people who can actually bring motivation to the players in the locker room. And by all accounts, seems like Nick Sirianni is viewed very highly as a leader in Philadelphia. And we're going to have more Nick Sirianni for the next couple of years here. I know a lot of people seem to get annoyed when he's chirping at the crowd, when he's just flapping his gums to fans in the stands. It does bug me a little bit. It seems like he doesn't do it as much now, but I think players see that and interpret that as him being his true, authentic self. And authenticity goes a long way. And I think that shows more about him as a leader, that because he's so authentic, because he isn't trying to mask who he is, I think players buy in a lot more. You could tell when a leader, and you might be able to relate to this in work or business, someone who's in charge, who has a position of power, you could tell when they're putting on a mask. You could tell when they're putting on a facade. And imagine your boss putting on a mask and trying to play pretend to be a character who just doesn't feel like it's them. You probably would lose respect or admiration for that person. And Nick Sirianni might be a lot of things, but the dude is himself. He is not afraid to be who he is. And that's a characteristic of the better leaders, the better coaches in the grand scheme of things. And so I'm happy for Nick. I'm happy for the Eagles. It would not surprise me if they end up back in the Super Bowl or make a deep playoff run once again. So good for Nick Sirianni. I'm sure we'll get the numbers and details later about how many years on this multi-year extension. I'm very curious about the salary as well, because you would imagine that more of the CEO style head coach who's not putting forth game plan or calling plays, I wonder if they're commanding the same upper echelon of salary like a Kyle Shanahan might be getting, or Ben Johnson. We saw he inked, I want to say it was $13 million a year. Is Sirianni getting a similar deal if he's not calling plays? So I'm sure we'll get those numbers in due time. But I did want to look into a couple of proposals that were coming in, and I want to say it's going to be before the spring league meeting. And there was a revised proposal coming forth by the Green Bay Packers about banning the tush push in particular. And just kind of looking a little bit into it, it looks like the specific element that they updated in particular is about pushing or pulling the runner, or related to assisting the runner in one way or another. So that could apply vaguely to some rogue plays here and there, where maybe say a player is getting wrapped up, a ball carrier is getting wrapped up, and a teammate tries to shove him forward to gain some extra yardage. That could end up being one of the backlashes, but notably about pushing back on the tush push, which, truth be told, whether it gets banned or not, I don't care that much, but it's interesting how this play sort of burst onto the scene, give or take 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, but only one team's really run the tush push to success. And that's the Super Bowl champs, the Eagles. And I've seen plenty of teams try it out, but only one team actually does it at such a high success rate. And I don't think it's some sort of cheap shoving or assisting the player that's really making this play hard to stop. I think it's Jalen Hurts, because the dude is just freaking jacked. I remember seeing, I think it was when he was at Oklahoma, he was squatting 600 pounds. The dude is so damn strong that you don't think that that quarterback has a distinct advantage on that particular play. It's not because of the cheap design of being assisted necessarily, but the dude has so much power that he can just force his way 1 yard to pick up a first down. That's the bigger thing. Everyone has been free to experiment with this play for the last 4 or 5 years. Yet only one team can reliably do it consistently. I've seen the Ravens try it with Mark Andrews here and there, and it doesn't really work. Last year in the playoffs, we saw Josh Allen try it 4, maybe even 5 times against Kansas City, And he only got it once out of 5 times. The Packers are proposing this amendment. Why aren't the Packers trying this play? It does seem like it is a bit of a product of, oh, we can't do it, so we don't want other people to do it either. Which, okay, fair enough. You're trying to get the best competitive advantage that you can. But at the end of the day, that is almost part of the strategy employed when you take a player like Jalen Hurts. When you take a quarterback with that sheer physical strength, you know you have a distinct advantage with power runs when the situation arises. And if other teams wanted to try to copy and implement that, try to find a quarterback of similar strength and dimensions. Or if you want a quarterback that can operate another unfair advantage, try to get some more speed guys. Most players can't keep up with Lamar Jackson. Are we going to ban quarterbacks that run faster than 4.3? It's a little silly. I think, actually, an interesting observation too, who's the team that knocked out Philly 2 of the last 4 years in the playoffs? Well, Tampa. Tampa beat them in 2021 and 23. Yeah, something like that. But Tampa eliminated the Eagles twice. Who do the Bucs happen to have? Vita Vea, who's like a massive nose tackle and can easily plug up the gaps around the center, which is exactly where the tush push is designed to attack. So it seems like Tampa does a great job at stopping this particular play. Well, they have the personnel to do that. So are we not surprised that Tampa actually holds up well against Philly in that regard, to the point where they beat them in the playoffs 2 of the last 4 years? I don't know exactly how it's going to go, if they're actually going to decide to overturn it or not. But at the end of the day, I would say, hey, any team that wants to eliminate the tush push, maybe think, why can't you do it, or why can't you stop it? Instead of just trying to get it changed in the rule book. But I don't have a strong opinion about it. We'll see what the league ends up going with. And hey, we'll see if any team can actually try to implement it in a better way. And then one more thing that kind of jumped out too was something that came from Detroit. And I have to say, I have just tremendous respect for the Lions for actually sticking with this proposal. And I think it makes a lot of sense at the end of the day. But we've seen weird years where there's a shitty division, and the division winner maybe finished 9-8, 8-9. I remember back in 2010, Seattle won the NFC West 7-9. And they got to host a playoff game. This last year, Detroit, Minnesota were competing for the number 1 overall seed. Minnesota happened to lose, and at 14-3, were a wildcard team going on the road. Which is rare and pretty wild, because then, what was the regular season for? Why go through that hard work to get 14 wins if you're just going to end up being a 5 seed anyway? And I got to give Detroit credit, because they were fighting tooth and nail to get the number 1 seed and not lose to Minnesota to get that top seed. But Detroit proposing that division champs with the division champ with the best record would be seeded number 1. And thereafter, the remaining 6 seeds would be determined strictly by record, regardless of division finish. So, you would take all division winners. Whoever had the best record would get the number 1 overall seed. Then the remaining division winners and then the other wildcard seeds would be arranged by record strictly, which I think is actually a pretty creative idea. And granted, it's a rare thing where a division winner really sucks that bad and a division is just top to bottom really shitty, but it happens enough to where you gotta imagine, like, hey, why hasn't this been the case to begin with? Now, I think in part the league really does want to emphasize winning the division specifically, but again, if your division sucks and you win it by going under 500, like nowadays a 8-9, 7-10 record, why should you be rewarded with the home game? You still can get the banner, be the NFC West, NFC South champs, but to suggest that you earned a home playoff game ahead of a team that won a lot more but just happened to be in a strong division, I think it's a little silly. And I'm not sure if that's going to honestly get through. The NFL does seem a little iffy about making a change that size, and especially because they really, really strengthen and emphasize win the division. So there could be a chance that it doesn't go through, or maybe it needs to get submitted a number of times until it eventually gets through. But it would have made a lot more sense for Detroit to finish with the number 1 overall seed, get the guaranteed home field advantage, and then Minnesota, well, actually, no, Philadelphia and Minnesota, I think, finished with the same record, but Minnesota would have likely had the number 3 seed right behind Philadelphia and been able to host a playoff game. Because again, you win that much, you want to treat the regular season with a lot of urgency. So it would make sense to reward the regular season wins by granting maybe a second place division team to actually have a chance to host a playoff game. But again, that would be a pretty big change. Who knows if the NFL will be on board with that? I still kind of like that concept, though. It just makes a lot of sense, but I don't envision the NFL making a change that kind of penalizes, to a degree, penalizing division winners. But those are a couple of interesting proposals, and we'll see what happens at the spring meeting. Looks like it's going to take place, I suppose, later today and tomorrow. So we might actually get some rulings about what will or will not be changed. So if you made it this far, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.